The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everybody. Thanks for attending. We're going to start in a couple minutes as people continue coming. So just about 2:03, we'll get going. All right, so we'll go ahead and get started. Everyone at REMI is very excited to present this webinar on site selection and workforce development strategies. I am Brian Reel, the marketing assistant at REMI, and Philip Meneghini and Jeffrey Dykes are going to be presenting today. Phil is an economic associate at REMI. He has been at REMI for a little over a year and works in New England, the Midwest, and the Carolinas. He specializes in client relations, sales, and technological support in issues like workforce development, transportation, and economic development. Our senior analyst, Jeff Dykes, will be answering Q&A questions at the end of the presentation. And Jeff has worked full-time at REMI for 7 years now. You can ask questions at any time during the presentation. At the end, hopefully we'll have time and we can answer them. If not, we'll reach out to you. But for now, yeah, take it away, Phil.
Yeah, thank you, Brian, and thank you all for attending. I'm sure you will all have, some familiarity with REMI and the expertise that we bring. But we use regional economic models to better inform public policy, hence the name. And I'm going to be talking about how, a REMI model could be utilized in, both these topics and talk a little bit how they're interlinked. So without any further ado, I'll get started. So this is a little bit of the agenda that kind of outline how we're going to structure this webinar. I'm going to have a topic overview, a brief topic overview, talk a little bit about Proterra, which is the company that we're going to be specifically talking about in this webinar, and we're going to do the demonstration on. And then we're going to do a site selection model demonstration, look at some of the notable results there, and then from there build a workforce development strategy, have that demo and those notable results. We'll discuss those there, of a conclusion, and then a Q&A with Jeff afterwards. So, a little bit about the topics, site selection and workforce development. We're going to be talking about both of these and how both of these are interrelated and really connected. So, site selection is about, determining which site a business would like to expand to or would like to build a new hub or move its headquarters to. So a big portion of that is looking at the location, and we'll dive into exactly a lot of the big components of site selection. But a huge portion of that is the workforce, and that has to do with the future growth opportunities with that site. So, a strong workforce with a really strong talent pool is essential and probably the biggest resource that a company can have. So, these two strategies are really interrelated, and having a good workforce development strategy to foster and increase education in a workforce is really pivotal and important when determining a site from the regional planner's perspective as well as the company's perspective. And both of those have very big vested interests in that. So jumping over to the next section. So Proterra. So, Proterra, if you're not familiar with it, is, innovative new electric battery EV manufacturer. And they specialize in making electric transit buses and making the batteries for those, as well as making the charging systems for those. And they were founded back in 2004. They were headquartered in Greenville, South Carolina, actually, from 2010 to 2015. They still have a site there, but they moved their headquarters over to California. And they create batteries for both consumer and commercial vehicles in this electric vehicle market. This electric vehicle market is just exploding. So Proterra has been exploding as well, and they're looking to expand more of their operations. So they're building a new manufacturing plant in Greer right now. And some of the company culture that's associated with that, they're a very green company, as most electric vehicle companies are, and they're very dedicated to focused on reducing emissions, and using that to lower the operating costs of businesses and launch this green economy. So this new facility in Greer, South Carolina, was announced I think the end of last year, and they're looking to build a new manufacturing plant in Greer. For those who are not familiar with the geography, is right on the edge of Spartanburg County and Greenville County. So it is right next to Greenville, where the original site was, and so they're planning on building this factory in the second half of 2022, and it's primarily going to be a storage battery manufacturing plant, from what I can gather. And so this would be actually the first battery manufacturing plant in the eastern United States, which would be huge for not only South Carolina but all of the East Coast. So this is a really big investment, and really important to watch, considering how big and explosive this electric vehicle market has been, making sure that we're at the forefront of this new innovative technology. So a little bit more information about this facility. So it's going to create a minimum of 200 new jobs, and Proterra has already said that they're going to make a minimum investment of $76 million into the site, and it's going to have a huge annual production capacity of batteries, and this is all initial in what they initially want to do with the site, but they really want to expand and continue to increase operations as this industry grows. So this is a site that's probably going to grow over time, and is probably this is probably just a starting point. So a little bit more about the area also. So we're seeing the electric vehicle market industry exploding, but we're also seeing this region in general explode. So going all the way from Charlotte, North Carolina to Atlanta, we're seeing explosions in population and economic activity. I have some statistics here. The Charlotte region is expected to grow by 50%. By 2025. We're seeing Atlanta, is adding approximately 117 people per day in their metropolitan statistical areas population. And, going all the way down Interstate 85, we're just seeing a huge growth of people and economic activity. So, this is a site that is experiencing huge growth in population and just all across the board. So, it's really interesting examining and looking at sites like this. And a little bit about site selection, as I said at the beginning of the webinar. So I have 4 of the key parts that we're going to hit on in this webinar, and we're going to look at specifically with the model. But of course, these are not all the things that are taken into consideration with site selection. And this is not all that you need to worry about, but these are some of the big ones. So, a big thing that I want to look at when a new site's moving is, the workforce, like we were saying before, which is why you want a workforce development strategy. So you need an educated workforce that has the right skills to do the jobs that are going to be coming into the area. And, quality and quantity both matter for this. So you want quality workers so they're productive, but you also want a steady stream of them. So this facility is probably going to want to expand. So they want, a steady stream of new people that they can draw from. Another big thing is the cost of production. So, anything, energy prices, real estate prices, all going through the roof right now. And, it's important when a certain firm or, an industry moves into an area, they want to look at what is going to be the prices for energy and what is going to be the price for their production in general. So is there is the supply chain set up so they can get all the commodities they need, because this will ultimately determine the profitability of their business there. And so that's very pivotal and important. You also need good infrastructure. So there needs to be, internet access, roads. There needs to be, energy. The amount of energy that they need to use needs to be available in the area. And these are required. They're not really something that they can budge on, because they need this to do business. And then, another thing that is being looked at in site selection now is a lot of these companies are looking at their values, and they're looking at that and prioritizing that when they're looking at a site. So, they want to go to a place, when they open up a site, it's kind of like they're, opening up a new home, and they want to make sure that the people that they are going to be interacting with and the communities that they're going to be in share the same values that they do. So, specifically with Proterra, they want to launch a green economy. They value that green economy, reducing emissions. They also, value a diverse workforce and other things like that. And we're seeing more and more and more that these company values are playing an increasing role in site selection. So these are some statistics for South Carolina as a whole. So as a whole, this is looking at employment by sector. We can see that manufacturing, retail trade, are at the top here. So they have a very strong manufacturing base, and they have a pretty strong growth rate in manufacturing. Construction is also up there. So building a new site, building a new manufacturing site, this seems like a strong economy that a manufacturing hub would want to move to, because they've already got this industry built out in this region. So, the demonstration that I'm going to be doing is looking at specifically the hypothetical question, like, well, what if we look at the site selection in Greer versus moving it to Columbia, the capital? And we're going to be, looking at what would be the regional impacts of having this electric vehicle manufacturing hub that Proterra is opening move in either of these sites. And we're going to be looking at what is going to be the cumulative impact and what are the pros and cons. So, we're going to be looking at, in Richland County, which is primarily where a lot of Columbia is. We're going to be comparing, Richland County and Spartanburg County as the two regions that we're going to be looking at in terms of impact and which site we would want to pick. So some facts about some general ideas of, what the area is like. So Richland County is, bigger than Spartanburg County. They have a larger labor force by a significant percentage, not by too much, but, they have a bigger population. Their labor force is bigger. They're producing more things, and they have a much higher output. Another key thing down at the bottom here that's important to note is that that labor productivity figure is for labor productivity for electric component manufacturing industry. So we can see that Richland County seems to have a more productive workforce in this specific industry. And we can also see that they also have a higher real disposable personal income per capita. So which means that their people in Richland County are getting paid more, most likely, and than people in Spartanburg County. So overall, we're seeing that Richland County is a bigger population, economy, and seems to be a little bit more better fit for this site. But we'll jump into the demonstration and see. So we're going to move over to the first demonstration and look at some of the results. So in this simulation, we're going to be using our flagship model, Policy Insight Plus, or PI Plus. And this specializes in generating realistic year-by-year estimates of what the local, state, and national effects across all economic indicators are going to be from a policy change. And that figure over there is a really good way to show how the structure of the model. So this shows how the variables are interrelated and changing how different things, changing different things will affect other variables and other output. This is a really good way to interpret results and just a general idea to understand how it's structured. And for this demonstration, we're going to be using a South Carolina county model. So this model has every single county in all of South Carolina, so Spartanburg County and Richland County, Charleston County, all the counties are broken out in this state in this regional model. So for the model setup, we're going to look at that $76 million initial investment, and for simulation purposes, I brought that up to $78 million since they said it was a minimum of $76 million. So I did, I took a pulse, I took one of the inputs, and I did a detailed industry sales for construction that would build these manufacturing structures and build out this manufacturing center of $78 million over a course of 3 years. We're going to start in 2020, and then we went all the way to 2022, and every single year we did an industry sales and construction for building these of $26 million. So it was $26 million worth of investment each year. And then we also increased employment after that for electrical equipment component manufacturing for 200 jobs starting at 2022 all the way up to 2060. I didn't add any more jobs than 200. I just had the simulation just start with 200 jobs and stick with that all the way to 2060. So assuming that there's going to be no increases in employment. And it's primarily, this facility is going to primarily do storage battery manufacturing, but it's also going to be doing some other electrical manufacturing. So I just decided to move up in industry and just do electrical equipment, appliance and component manufacturing, industry employment, in a whole. So I can capture all these other, like energy wire and cable manufacturing, as well as, electrical equipment manufacturing, and all these other manufacturing specificities that probably are applicable as well in this factory. So here are the model inputs. So I set this up. So I did the construction investment as one, and then the employment as another. And I did this for Richland County on the top, and then I did one for Spartanburg County. And I ran these two simulations, and I looked at, and then I'm going to look at the regional results from each of these simulations in each region. So for Greer, we're seeing, largely everything's going up, which in general is, really good. We're seeing that little spike initially. Now, there's a lot of variables here that we're looking at, but you can see that, a blue line that spikes up at the beginning, that's employment. So employment spikes up with those construction jobs, and then it, falls a little bit as those construction jobs taper off. And then it kind of has continuous growth from the employment from the facility actually being up and running. We're also seeing population. That blue line that shoots way up, that's population. So population continues to flow into, Spartanburg County. There's more jobs available. There's more economic activity. More people are moving into the region. We're seeing a similar thing with the labor force at a little bit of a reduced rate. We're also seeing that red line down at the bottom is economic output. So output is increasing as well, slowly but steadily, which is very healthy. Personal income, disposable personal income and disposable income per capita, personal income are increasing. We're seeing that the real disposable income, personal income per capita is decreasing slightly though. But, all these are largely positive numbers, which is good to see. And then the general economic results for Columbia are a little bit more impressive in magnitude, but same general direction. So we're seeing that, employment is going up. You can see with that blue line, as well as same with that population. We're seeing the same thing with output. It's increasing a little bit faster. And we're seeing that these magnitudes are higher than the previous slides. So we're seeing more economic output generated from this activity, as well as more employment being generated from moving the site over to Richland County. one thing to note, though, is that we're seeing that real disposable personal income per capita is the only thing that we see that is decreasing. So we're seeing that, you know, people are having less money despite all this increase in economic output. And so I took these two forecasts and I put them side by side, and using the studies tab and project prioritization functionality in the model, I was able to look at the two site selections, you know, according to the key economic variables that are important to me. And I took averages across the next 40 years. So, you know, these labor force changes and employment changes are averages for the forecast out to 2060. So, you know, across the board, the site selection in Columbia seems like it is much better. We're seeing, you know, a much bigger expansion of the labor force, much bigger employment increase in the long run. More people are migrating into the area. We're seeing output increase at a much higher degree than the other one. And we're even seeing compensation, you know, not being, compensation inequality is not being as impacted as it would be at the Greer site. And, you know, a lot of this is probably due to Columbia's, you know, they have more productive workers. They're also paying them more, and they're in a bigger regional economy. So a lot of those people that are there are, you know, making more money, spending more of it in the local economy. You know, when I was looking at the results, you could see employment, and you could see huge increases in employment in Richland County in food and accommodation services induced from this original investment. And so you can see, you know, just you know, people, you know, working in this manufacturing plant, spending the money in the economy at a higher degree than they would at the Greer site. So according to, I weighted each of these variables, and I got a weight of 30 for Columbia, and then Greer got a 24. So according to this, you know, Columbia would have a bigger economic impact in the state than the site selection in Greer, according to the model. So now I'm going to do, you know, look at how we could devise a workforce development scenario and program that could potentially, you know, make Greer, or, you know, make Greer a little bit more attractive and kind of market Greer a little bit more. So we're going to look at ways that we can build a workforce development strategy and how that can impact the regional, the economic impact, you know, across the state and in the region as a whole. So Proterra, a little bit about, you know, Proterra is very involved with their workforce. You know, they're working alongside United Steelworkers to create proper training. So they're very involved with the workforce development and building their talent pool. And, you know, that's all, you know, about building that highly skilled clean energy workforce and advanced manufacturing. They have an electric bus manufacturing technology training program, and that's focused on advancing diversity and inclusion. They want to, you know, give opportunities to underprivileged communities. So they're really prioritizing building these communities from the ground up, and really helping them, set them with the skills to really enter into this electric vehicle industry and have lots of success. So, you know, the belief generally is that the collaboration between workers and businesses is crucial, you know, to decrease carbon emissions in the long term, and, you know, help our economy. And so here are some of the programs that you know, we're seeing used across the state. So just explore some of the ways that we can, you know, leverage our workforce. Specifically in Indiana, I work a lot in Indiana. They have a program that looks at, you know, that looks at having employers train employees, and offering, you know, assistance to employees, financial assistance through, you know, grant programs to reimburse different employers for training their workforce. And they've had lots of success with this. You know, other states are doing similar things, of having the employers directly teach the employees with the skills that is needed for this job. And so they've had some success with that. Also, looking at more of the universities. Universities are also a really crucial way to build up the workforce. And, Proterra was originally, drawn to the area, and this area in South Carolina, originally because of the Clemson University International Center for Automotive Research, provides a really good workforce and talent pool to draw from. And yeah, there's just lots of really good talent coming out there. So, the university is a really good resource to kind of build out other workforce development programs and really build a really highly educated workforce to fit in a lot of these positions. So this is taken from the model, looking at the industry and examining the occupational matrix, looking at what occupations are actually being hired for this specific field in this industry. So at the top we're seeing assemblers and fabricators, which are probably working on the assembly floor. We've got metal workers and plastic workers, and we've got engineers. So we have a mix of different occupations that go into advanced manufacturing, and training these people in these skills will be pivotal to help set these people up for success in the electric vehicle manufacturing industry, moving forward. So, when we make a workforce development program, we want to make sure that it's targeting these specific skills and, preparing them for these specific roles. So this is going to be a sample workforce development strategy that I devised. So we're going to look at, both these things. Like I was saying, we're going to leverage the university, and then we're going to leverage Proterra's help with the workforce development and local community building with the workforce. So it's going to come in two parts. So usually assemblers and fabricators, you can usually get those skills with an apprenticeship, some sort of training program. Doesn't require an extensive four-year degree, and a lot of these jobs pay a lot more than what other people or lower skilled people would be making in, let's say, like accommodations or hospitality. So we can build an apprenticeship program, work with Proterra to offer a training program, a local training program, and give them some sort of reimbursement to train people specifically what they would be doing in the factory. So relating to the role assemblers and fabricators. And this would be really important for taking people that don't have a lot of skills and that are stuck in these specific jobs, and basically giving them the skills to really enter into an industry and market that seems to be growing rapidly and is moving towards the future in a very meaningful and fast, explosive way. And then the second part of this is that we want to build up an engineering program. So we're going to strengthen Clemson's engineering program to support electric vehicle manufacturing and the engineering that is required for that. And this is important because the university can help with building these four-year degrees and building the workforce with this more complicated and more time-intensive way that's needed in order to get people in these occupations. So we're going to look at simulating these two programs together and seeing how we can and simulate that compared with what we already had with the manufacturing plant moving in, and see what the results are. So for the simulation, we're going to be looking at socio-economic indicators. So back to their company culture, they really are looking at these social equity issues, and they want to help people who may not have had the best educational background, or may are lower income earners or from disadvantaged racial groups. So the socioeconomic indicators is a modular addition to the model that can look at things, a much more granular analysis at things like jobs by race and gender, and looking at different impacts on different demographic and socioeconomic groups. So we can look at compensation rate changes for various income earners, employment changes for people of different educational backgrounds. We can look at labor force participation across different races and genders. You can also look at inflation's impact, and if it impacts different different income levels disproportionately. So this is really crucial to really get a good idea of how these programs are actually affecting the different communities and not just general economic output. So the model's set up. So we're going to use the occupational training variable. So this, does a labor shock to the labor market and puts in X amount of people in a specific occupation. So to simulate this program in the university to train engineers, we're going to first input and train 10 engineers the first year in 2022, and then by 2060 we're going to have a total of 100 engineers trained and entering the workforce in Spartanburg County. Then we're going to do the same thing with the assemblers and apprenticeship program. We're going to do that labor shock and train 50 the first year in 2022, and up to 400 people complete the program by 2060. And we're also going to target these programs like we went over with Proterra's mission and company values. We're going to increase the participation rate in these programs for African Americans and these by 5%, and this will help build a diverse workforce. And we're also going to target individuals between 18 and 30 years old to join these programs. And so these would be the model inputs that we're looking at. So we're going to do, like I was saying before, we've got the construction, we've got the employment from the electric vehicle manufacturing plant, we've then got the Clemson engineering program. So we're introducing increasing the supply of that occupation for engineers. We're also increasing the participation rate for African Americans for aged 18 to 30 by 5% starting in 2022. And then we also got that other the apprenticeship program that's going to build up the assemblers and fabricators workforce, all in Spartanburg County. And looking straight at the results, we're seeing immediately the most striking thing is that there's a big migration out of Spartanburg County. And this is something, we can see that the labor force spikes up a little bit. The labor force is the darker line, lighter line is the population. And we're seeing the labor force start to get dragged down from the population, not as fast as a rate because, we're training a lot of these people in new skills and they're entering the labor force. But we're seeing that this population decline in Spartanburg County is really what is bringing down the labor force in the long run. And, I'm just going to jump over to the next slide because understanding this is really important. And, when you input a workforce development program, and you're training these people in these skills, what happens is that if there's not jobs available for them, they're going to leave. Now that they have these specific targeted skills, they can leave and go somewhere else. So a lot of people, the result of this is that we essentially trained too many people in these positions, and now they have this education that they didn't have before, and now they're going to go elsewhere to find jobs for that education that they achieved. Because there's a lack of employment. So these 200 jobs are not enough to sustain these workforce development programs, essentially. This does serve as a boon for Proterra, though. So if they plan on ramping up operations, we can clearly point to the fact that we're having a highly educated workforce leave the area, and that there's a steady stream a steady stream is going to be coming from these apprenticeship programs and these universities. And so it is kind of a boon to Proterra, but there's two ways that we can fix this in our workforce development policy. We can bring in more jobs, so we can open up another manufacturing plant, electric vehicle manufacturing plant, which will probably be happening due to the accelerated rate of electric vehicles and their adoption. But Proterra also plans on expanding operations, so that's another thing. So this would be really good for them to expand operations now that there's a really good talent pool there that are skilled specifically in skills that would be useful in this industry. So we can also cut back on the workforce development program, so decrease the rate at which we're training people a little bit to match a little bit more about the jobs that are entering into the area. So we can match that, so we can balance that So, those are the two main ways that we could revise this workforce development strategy, but let's look a little bit more at the results before we look at changing it. So this is probably the biggest thing that would be of interest to Proterra, or from the company's perspective or from the regional planner's perspective, is that you can see that the graph on top shows the relative cost of production, and below that is the labor force, is the cost of labor. And so you can see that the relative cost of production for this specific industry in this area is steadily decreasing over time. And we're also seeing that that's being driven largely by the labor, which is the green line below that. So labor, the cost of labor is decreasing, and as a result, it's pulling down the relative cost of production in general. And what is driving this? And we're seeing that as we're training more of these people in these specific skills, and they know what they're doing when they are entering this job, we can see on this table below that labor productivity is just steadily increasing. So the labor productivity in the county is just increasing steadily in this industry. And so the workers are getting more productive. They can create more output essentially with less work. And as a result, the cost of production is going down. And this is really insightful because this, in the long run, will lead to more profitability for Proterra. So this is a very, very interesting result. And then, the general economic results, these are insightful as well. And, what we're seeing is that we're seeing the labor force and employment and population all spike up, but then they, slowly start to decline as we train more and more people, and they leave the area as those 200 jobs stay the same, and the 200 jobs don't increase. So we're seeing more people leave the area. However, despite more people leaving the area and employment decreasing proportionally, employment is still positive from the baseline, but we're seeing output remain steady. So we're seeing output remain the same and slightly increase towards the end and start to go on an upward trend. And output is that red line. So we're seeing output start to increase despite the decreased labor force, now that the fact that they're trained more and these workers are more productive. So, this population decrease isn't really impacting general output for the area at all. Output's remaining the same. It's just that these workers are more productive. And another thing to note, that gray line at the bottom, like, we were saying in the original results, we saw real disposable personal income per capita declining, which is generally not a good thing, because it means that people don't have generally are not, don't have enough, disposable income. They don't have money to spend. We're seeing that increase. So as they become more productive, they're getting paid more, and as a result, we're seeing that that they have more real disposable personal income per capita, and that just continues to increase, that gray line, all the way out to 2060, but towards the end seems to start to flatten out a little bit. But from afar, these results look kind of a little bit misleading and poor, but when you really dive into them, we can see that labor productivity is increasing and people are earning more money, which is generally good. And now we're going to dive into the socioeconomic results. So, this is important for Proterra's mission, and this would also be important for them when looking at the analysis of an area and what would be the impact of their workforce development programs, as well as their new manufacturing hub. So this chart is really interesting. So we broke the industries into different quintiles, and this is with the SEI edition. We're looking at, so the industries are broken out into different quintiles based on compensation rates. So the industries earning with the compensation rates that are the lowest, in the lowest 20%, that's pictured there, and then it goes all the way up to the highest 20%. So lowest 20% would be hospitality or restaurants and stuff like that, and the highest 20% would be engineers, computer science occupations. And what we're seeing here is that the compensation rate is changing drastically. So the industry is paying the lowest 20%, their compensation rate seems to be shooting up and tapering off a little bit towards the end. That's that blue line, and then we're seeing that, and then we're seeing that the highest 20% are decreasing at a decreasing rate, and we're seeing that shows that there's going to be a decrease in income inequality. And what's largely driving this, I believe, is the fact that we're training new people, and we're training these people that traditionally have lower paying jobs, and now they're getting mid to higher paying jobs. So this basically shows that income inequality is decreasing in a kind of in a little bit more complicated of a way. And then we can look employment by occupational quintile. So we're seeing employment is decreasing, similar to the other trend. We're seeing employment is decreasing in the lowest 20%, and then increasing in the second 20%, which is probably those assemblers and fabricators, and it's also increasing in the highest 20%. So those engineers as well are benefiting, and employment is increasing for them. So we're seeing people in these lower skill, lower paying jobs are moving to higher paying jobs, which is a good thing. And then we're also looking at participation rates by race. So we're encouraging Black, non-Hispanic people to be encouraging in these to be part of these workforce development programs, and so we're seeing their participation rates are exploding as well. So we're seeing participation rates far above any other of the racial groups here, which is what Proterra was probably wanted to do with their apprenticeship program. So these are encouraging results as well. And then looking at employment by race, you can see that these jobs, not only is the labor force participation for this group increasing, but they also are getting jobs. So employment is increasing much more in the Black, non-Hispanic racial group than any of the other ones. And so then we'll just jump into the conclusion and jump to the Q&A. So, for site selection, we just looked at the workforce and, a simple workforce development strategy. We can look at other workforce development strategies, but, there's other ways to look at, having a region be more competitive and profitable in the long run. You can look at lowering energy prices. What would be the impact of lowering energy prices? Or broadband expansion is key as well. Broadband expansion just increases productivity across the board, and as a result increases economic well-being and makes a region much more competitive. Same thing with lowering energy prices. Energy prices are super high right now. We can increase profitability by keeping those energy prices to a minimum, because that's just a cost. And then looking at the company values, again, we didn't really touch on this, but looking at a community that reduces emissions, we can look at how we can reduce emissions more and make a community more attract a community more attractable to different businesses based on the values that it has. So that's another thing that we can touch on on the other side with looking at emissions. So what's next? So labor is the most valuable resource, and so having a targeted workforce development strategy is key and essential. So we need to continue refining this workforce development strategy. People are leaving the area at an unprecedented rate, so we need to look at different ways that we can retain those workers, through different jobs and different employment opportunities. So the next scenario that I would run, due to time, we're not going to run another scenario, but I would look at a scenario to see if we expand Proterra's operations. So if we increase employment by, let's say, by 30, like 20 or 30 employees every single year, what would a lot more of those people, I'm guessing, are probably going to stay in the area because they have the skills and the job opportunities are there. So another scenario would be looking at expanding the employment and increasing the employment numbers on the model input side and seeing, how many of those people end up staying. So, we would also look at another thing that I was thinking about doing is looking at, well, training some of these other occupations. We only did assemblers and engineers. There was also metal workers, plastic workers, and other production workers that were top occupations for this type of manufacturing. So we could look at training people in these different fields and see if see if more of that workforce is needed in that area in those specific occupations. So we can examine looking at different training people in these different occupations. So it's just important to investigate other key economic drivers as well to see what would be driving a workforce away and what will keep a workforce, as well as what's going to make a workforce more productive. So conclusion from our findings and from in this webinar, the conclusion of it is that when you're making a workforce development strategy and looking at the site specifically in the context of site selection, you need to be mindful of the population changes. So as you train more people, they have more economic mobility. They can leave the area now because they have a set of skills, and if they have a specific set of skills, they can get hired, pretty much anywhere across the country. And we're seeing, even with like remote workers, we're seeing, more and more people, just take jobs way out of the area because they have the skills, and they'll move out of the area and they'll leave your regional economy. So also, workforce development is really effective at increasing, increasing diversity and decreasing income inequality. So training lower wage workers and people with disadvantaged backgrounds will help to give them more opportunities, and helps to is a really strong economic driver to economic success. It'll increase productivity, and it'll take a huge portion of the population that might not be part of the labor force and have them enter the labor force with the skills needed. And a lot of these things are dependent on the regional economy. So another thing, with workforce development, you want to make sure that you're looking at your specific regional economy and training for the specific occupations that are required in your key industry sectors, because having a workforce development strategy that's training for the wrong thing will lead to that leakage, like I was talking before. And finally, workforce development is very useful and very powerful for increasing productivity. So as workers get better and have more skills that they can utilize that are specific to industry knowledge, their productivity increases much more. So it's very effective at that. And with that, I'm going to end the webinar, but we're gonna have a Q&A session. Jeff is going to be here as well, but I'm happy to answer any questions, and just to hear some of you guys' feedback. So
all right, thank you very much, Phil, for presenting, and thank you to everybody who attended the presentation. Jeff will now get into one of the questions that we received, but if you have any questions about REMI and the work we do, or any questions about the presentation itself, please reach out to us at info@remi.com. We are happy to connect. So first question, Jeff, is please, can you comment on the reasons and implications of declining real disposable income per capita when you were discussing site selection in your first set of analyses?
Yeah, sure. Wait, sorry, Brian, can you just read that question over again?
Of course. So, can you comment on the reasons and implications of declining real disposable income per capita when you were discussing site selection in your first set of analyses?
Oh, yeah, sure. I think if I'm remembering correctly, we were looking at some of the first couple income quintiles, and they were growing at a faster rate. So what can happen there is, since they have a lower average annual wage rate, it might be bringing down the average disposable income per capita. But the benefit there is that we're seeing the lower income quintiles as increasing for their overall income. So I think that's that was causing the decline in the overall disposable income per capita. Good question.
Great, thank you. And one more. I noticed tax rates were not a part of the site selection criteria, yet many legislatures and politicians continue to assert the importance of lower taxes or tax increment financing to attract businesses. What is your comment on this?
I can jump in on this. I would say that's a, we explored, I didn't really touch on the tax portion of this or tax incremental financing, but, there's various different ways that we could leverage and model something like that. And, we just decided not to look at it. We looked specifically at the workforce, but, folded into that, what I was saying about the Indiana workforce development programs that they have specific, grants and, that they, not completely similar, but, similar to the fact that the government essentially will be offering incentives to employers in a specific way, by giving them money for tuition reimbursement and stuff like that. So, using tax incentives and tax reimbursements are all really effective ways in site selection. We just didn't really touch on it, but I definitely think that those also are pivotal because tax incentives and tax incremental financing ultimately will lead to, increased economic opportunity and activity, which is, important for any sort of region and any person, any industry or business looking at moving to a certain location. They want the business climate to be, appropriate for them, as well as they want to get as many benefits they can and, tax benefits as they can get from that. We just didn't really explore that in this webinar, but that's definitely another thing that I didn't really touch on as much that would be crucial when looking at site selection.
All right.
I don't know if you want to add anything, Jeff.
Yeah, I think you covered it. It's definitely good to include comparison between the taxes because of that. That'll affect the production costs, relative production costs to each other. If one region is offering more tax incentives, then overall production costs will be lower. So definitely good to take that into account.
Great, thank you very much. And if you have any other questions, feel free to reach out to Phil, whose email is currently being displayed on the screen. And you can also email info@remi.com with any questions or concerns. And yeah, we would appreciate connecting with you. And thank you very much for attending this webinar. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.